how many of you are writers or want to be writers? Okay, good. I can talk about the writing aspects as well as just the actual science stuff. What I'd like to do is start by talking a little bit about just how science works, give maybe an example from history, and then we'll talk about an example from Star Wars, just so you can see how you do this developing your own science. Then we'll move on to inventing your own technology. Probably have some questions at that point. I'll talk about how technology affects a culture and how you need, as a writer, to think about how your technology is going to affect the culture. I'll make you some questions. And then if you read the description in the, wherever you read the description, you saw I was going to have a little contest with unique but lame prizes. So I've come up with a unique but lame prize. What we will do at that point is a thing I've done at other conventions called What's Wrong with the Scenario. And I will give you a scenario or some sort of thing, and you will tell me what is wrong with it. I'll give you just a simple example so you can start getting your minds into this mode. In a world run by vampires, the only two humans hide during the day, hide at night, and forage for food by day. What's wrong with the scenario as stated?
Vampires need more than 2 humans to feed on. Vampires need more than 2 humans to feed on.
Right. What are the vampires eating? So how do you change this sentence? There are several ways of doing it. One is the last 2 free humans, which implies you have herds of humans that the vampires are controlling, or any number of other ways. But the scenario as stated doesn't work. So that's what we'll be doing at the end. Okay, any thoughts? Water backstage. Is there any water? Let's start with science. There are some basic assumptions, basic guidelines that real science has you want to think about when you're inventing science. Now, bear in mind, a lot of times you're inventing more tech than science. You're using the standard physics, chemistry in your story. But there are some things about science I'll just run over first. First is the assumption, thank you. First is the assumption that physics and chemistry work the same everywhere in the universe. Now, bear in mind, that is an assumption. We don't really know that. We know certain types of physics seem to work because we can see secret variables and such in stars, so we know that the astrophysics works. On the other hand, there are all sorts of things like the redshift. We assume that's because everything's moving apart, and that not that the speed of light is doing something funny on the way to us. But again, it's only an assumption. You have to be aware that there are assumptions you're making you may not know you're making. And there are also different situations, such as high speed, you get into relativistic effects, very small, you get into quantum effects, and you have to keep aware of what area of physics you're going to be dealing with when you're creating your own science. Okay, second point is you generally do not want to contradict the known basic laws of science: conservation of momentum, conservation of mass energy. A good example of how you do this is Larry Niven had a series of stories where he had something called transfer booths. You go into the one booth, like a phone booth, you go into the phone booth, you dial a number, and it teleports you someplace to that other phone booth. Okay, well, if you think about it, if the Earth is rotating and you go north, your speed is going to suddenly go, your conservation of momentum means you're going to go to the back end of the booth. So what he did was he had something in one of the stories where you see this huge mass of iron with floats on it in a pool of water, and you have it bobbing a little bit every once in a while, and this is absorbing momentum from the various jumps. Larry didn't have to explain how it all works. He just had to recognize that we've got, you need to consider conservation of momentum in all of this. And that's all you need to do with your science. One other footnote, you need to know how your science works, but you do not need to explain all of it to the reader. In fact, unless it's necessary for the story, you will bore them to tears if you explain all of it. Side footnote, when I'm talking about science, I'm also including magic. Your magic has to have rules to it. If you're doing magic, how do the spells interact? How do they bounce off each other? What are the counters? You need to know how this works to make a coherent story. Otherwise, you have a wizard pulling something out of a hat, and not only is this kind of unfair to the reader, it's also way too easy for you, and the writing shouldn't be easy, you know. But the plotting shouldn't be. Okay, so you don't want to contradict known law. The third thing is a bit more subtle. Oh yes, I was going to start with this just to see if anybody recognizes it. It's a warm summer evening in ancient Greece, circa 600 BC. Okay, right, yes, Sheldon trying to explain physics to him. An interesting aspect of science is that the formulas tend to be simple and elegant, such as force equals mass times acceleration, Maxwell's equations, del dot E equals 0, del dot B equals 0, del dot E equals derivative B with respect to t, etc. Now, you may not know what all those terms mean. I've forgotten half of them myself. But the point is, it's not a huge formula. It's a nice, simple sort of thing. Even relativity, the Lorentz factor is a square root of 1 minus v squared over c squared. Very simple. So keep an eye, if you're going to do any numbers and calculations, be aware that science tends to go with simple calculations. An example of that would be, how many of you are familiar with the epicycles idea of planetary motion? Any of you remember that from, okay. The basic idea was, we assumed the Earth is the center of the solar system. The moon and the sun and all the planets orbit around the Earth. Okay, that works fine for the moon and the sun because the motions are pretty even. The planets, though, because as Earth's orbit overtakes one of the outer planets, it will seem to go back and then forward, retrograde motion, in the sky as you're watching. So they came up with the idea of epicycles, that you had an orbit of a planet, but then the planet was following kind of on this circle that's centered on that orbit. Okay, so you've got the orbit going here, you've got the epicycle, the planet is actually going around like this, and you can explain the retrograde motion as it goes this way. Okay, that worked until the observations got better, and then the numbers got tighter, and they started having to add more and more epicycles on top of epicycles on top of more epicycles, and eventually the thing got so unwieldy it was very hard to figure out what was going on. And then we came to the realization that the Earth was not the center of the solar system, the sun was the center of the solar system. And once you did that, the epicycles disappear. Actually, they didn't. They became much simpler because the original assumption of Kepler and the others was the orbits were circular. They're actually ellipses, slightly, just a little off circular. So the complexity went down, but it doesn't disappear until they had the actual, exactly what it really was. And then, of course, we get into perturbations of their planets, and that sort of thing enters in. But the idea is that things got very complex, and then because it was wrong, and then it got simpler when you actually have the correct explanation. So that brings us to the next point, that science is seldom a straight line path. It will go off in all sorts of different directions. It will go into dead ends, dead alleys, and one of the psychological or social problems of getting science to move is that all the old scientists firmly believe the old model. And it's been said that if you have a new theory that explains everything, you need to wait for the old scientists to die. And it's just a psychological thing. If I've been wrong, no, I've not been wrong all these years. I can't possibly have been wrong all these years. The steps of doing science are typically given as characterization. You do an observation, definition, measurement, or whatever. You come up with a hypothesis, your theoretical explanation as to how this is working. Next, you need to make a prediction. You take your hypothesis, make some deductions. Okay, if this theory is true, then this should happen. And then you experiment, you test this hypothesis, test this prediction, see if it comes correct. And then you're on your way to having a theorem that seems to reflect reality. The alternative model, which I kind of like, because the real world procedure it's called sometimes, is you gather information, form the hypothesis, test it experimentally, analyze the data, interpret the data and draw conclusions, and my favorite part, publish the results, and then you retest. And that retesting is often done by other scientists who read your publication and, okay, let's see if this actually works, if we can reproduce it, etc. Note in this one, the original one makes it sound like it's all pure science. As soon as you add in the interpret the data, now you've got the possibility of preconceptions, prejudices coming in. You're seeing sometimes what you want to see. And you go anywhere from accidentally giving the wrong interpretation because of what you're thinking, to all the way to, well, this data point doesn't seem to fit my hypothesis, I'll just throw it out. And all the way to outright fraud because my grant depends on me coming up with these results, which doesn't happen very often, but unfortunately it actually does. Along the same line is the whole question of computer models being risky to do because you don't necessarily have all the facts. I know the early global warming predictions and models didn't include how the oceans absorb carbon dioxide because they didn't know how to factor that in. Well, obviously that's a lot of ocean surface out there. That has to be a big factor, but at first they didn't know how to do it. And therefore you're going to automatically get some kind of skewed results. So watch out whenever it's a computer model, computer simulation. It may be a good starting point. It may not be. Think of it as Wikipedia for science. Okay, so any questions on that? You're all dazzled by the science. Okay, that's what? I'm faking it well, yes. Okay, let's go to a real world, a Star Wars example. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for, okay, what is one of the big scientific theories and everything in Star Wars? That would be hyperspace. Virtually any universe, science fiction universe, where you have to get from hither to yon and back again, and the people who you left at yon are still about the same age, you're going to have to do some kind of faster than light travel. But you can tailor this FTL, this hyperspace, however you want to do it. So what we're going to do is going to look for characteristics of Star Wars hyperspace, and then I want you to back it up with something you've seen in the movies. Okay? Get this audience participation thing going early. I will kick it off with, you can't access hyperspace too close to a planet. Okay, how do you know this? You know this, there are several examples. Yeah, go ahead.
When they're leaving Tatooine, he has to get further away from Tatooine before he can make the jump to light speed.
Okay, now you could argue that's because he has to do the calculation. There's another better example.
Interdictor cruisers.
Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute, but okay, yeah. Okay, well that's the reasoning behind it. You've got to get out of the gravity well, but how do we know we have to get further out and back?
You have to shut down the reactors on the Death Star and get the ship off.
Have to shut down the reactor. Give 2 more tries and that'll...
On Bespin, if they could have jumped while in the atmosphere, they would have, I think.
At Bespin,
when they're trying to escape in the Falcon, they don't know the hyperdrive's disabled yet.
Okay, well, hyperdrive was broken at that point. You're on the right track. One more.
If they have to get away from the planet, why wouldn't they just jump to hyperspace from the landing platform?
Okay. Right, okay. The one I was actually thinking about was Empire Strikes Back, leaving Hoth. Because they have to go all the way past those Star Destroyers. If they could have jumped sooner, trust me, they would have. So, I mean, a lot of these are, that's the one I think shows it the most clearly. Okay, what other characteristic? Any Anybody want to throw out a characteristic of hyperspace we see in Star Wars? Yeah.
Pseudo-motion.
The pseudo-motion, okay. What I'm calling a slingshot kind of into hyperspace and slingshotting back out. Okay, this is a little bit subtle. We'll go with this one. One of the things you have to think about in watching science fiction or reading it or inventing your own is not just see what is done, but see what is not done. The slingshot hyperspace is a perfect example of that. We have, in fact, I had a long talk with the West End Games guys about this over dinner one time years ago. If you have to, do you have to slow yourself down from hyperspace back to speed, or is it done automatically? That would be the question. Any thoughts?
You have to do
I
it.
can't hear you all, Hunter.
Automatic.
Do it yourself.
Do it yourself.
Okay, a lot of automatic. Okay, you can't, it has to be that it's automatic. You're kind of like a rubber band snapping you into hyperspace and then the rubber band reverse snapping you back out and slowing you back down. The reason it can't be something you have to do yourself is that if you have to slow down the ship coming out of hyperspace and you don't do it, you have the ship going at very close to the speed of light, you have a mass driver weapon. You just whap it into your planet, you don't need the Death Star, that's it, you're going. And the fact you never saw that means that's not how it works. So when you're writing your own science, your own hyperdrive, whatever, your own time travel, bear in mind what you show the reader and what you have not happening that should have happened if the science went the other direction are both important. Okay, we talked about leaving Tatooine. It seems to be a straight line type of path that you're doing. And you also, it's a time-dependent calculation. How do we know that? Time-dependent in that you've got to do it just before you jump.
Take a few moments to get the technicians from the NAC computer, Han Solo.
Right, otherwise Han would have set this up before Luke and Obi-Wan got there. It would just be a logical thing to do. Let's set up our escape because we know people are looking for us here. The fact that he had to wait until they're off planet means differences of even a few minutes are going to affect how you're doing your calculation. We also know from that same scene that there are mass shadows of some sort. Your hyperspace does interact with normal space in some sense. Otherwise, since your supernova is in real space, flying right through it shouldn't matter. Well, it obviously does because Han says so. So you've got some kind of mass shadow thing that you're going to have to avoid these. And again, a lot of stuff has been codified later on in the material, but I'm showing where they are starting from the movies and giving you an illustration of how you need to do this in your own writing. Another effect of hyperspace is there appears to be no combat or chasing into hyperspace. Once Han makes the jump, we don't have a whole bunch of other ships following him and chasing him down. We've got I told you to lose those Imperial slugs, but it's not clear whether they were waiting or kind of recalculated and kind of come up near him and he vectored off after his first jump. But we don't have, in Empire, we don't have Vader saying, follow them when they make the jump off of Hoth. Notice that's not necessarily a given. Babylon 5, you had chasing and combat in hyperspace all the time. In Star Trek, they seem to have it both directions. Yeah.
In A New Hope, Luke's first assumption when they spotted the TIE fighter was that it followed them through hyperspace, though.
Okay, that's a good question. It must have followed us. But then again, Luke doesn't always know what he's talking about. He's a moisture farmer. What does he know from hyperspace? Yes, that would be an argument that you can follow through hyperspace.
That you had to get far enough away from the other ships too to make the jump, as well as being far enough away from other planets. So the idea that perhaps if the TIE fighter is right next to you, suck it.
Okay. And all of these things, what she was saying was that maybe as Luke jumped, there was a TIE fighter too close to, or as Han jumped, there somehow gets sucked into the vortex or whatever, trapping into the whole thing. into the hyper jump, whatever. It doesn't appear to work that way in Star Wars. That's a good point, though. That is something, it's an argument that direction. You've got a good argument the other way. And all these details are things you will need to know when you're writing your own hyperspace, because you need to know, can that TIE fighter get dragged along with it? In fact, one of the great scenes, it's not a hyperspace thing, was at the climax of Galaxy Quest. You don't realize I'm outnumbering you, I'll fire you. You don't realize I'm dragging mines. Crazy. Fun movie. Okay, we mentioned the interdictors. So we also know you can artificially block access in some way. That's from the single throwaway line. You just have to keep them from escaping at Endor. So we don't, again, we don't have to know how. West End and later publications came up with whole concept of the interdictor and how it makes making mass shadows and such. You don't necessarily have to do that in your story. You just have to know how it's done so you don't contradict yourself. And one of okay, anybody else have one? Then I'll give my last one. Yeah.
Relativistic free travel.
Relativistic what?
Free hyperspace travel.
Relativistic.
In that once you leave and you get to where you're going, people have aged 70 years.
Right, yeah, we're doing with a hyperdrive avoids the relativistic problem, yeah. Anything else from the Star Wars hyperspace?
There's lines, star lines when they jump into space, and then I think there's a model of the sky when they're in hyperspace.
Yeah, that's your visual. There's some kind of a transitional sort of thing where you get the star lines and then you're into hyperspace, which is a very cool image. If you're doing books, you probably don't get to do this so much. If you're doing movies, go for it. The other interesting fact about hyperspace in Star Wars is that you appear to go slower as you're approaching your destination. Okay, how do I know that? Because Han can come out of hyperspace manually. If you're doing much faster than light, if you're going even a fraction of the speed of light, you can't come out manually. You have to do this by computer to get your pinpoint, so you're not overshooting your planet or whatever by 1 million miles or 100 million miles. So on some level, you must be slowing down enough to actually see the clock and time yourself out. One of the most fascinating types of hyperspace that I've seen in movies, I have no idea whether this was done deliberately or just because it's a cool visual, is in Aliens. You have people going into what appear to be suspended animation sleep. And yet, when they ask how long before we don't report in, can we get a backup course here, the line's like 21 days or something like that. Okay, normally why do you go into hyperspace, hypersleep, or just any kind of hibernation for only 3 weeks? And my best explanation is this works reverse of relativity. It actually takes longer on ship than it does in real space. Hence, we have to go into hibernation because it's otherwise going to be much longer for us, which is the exact opposite from how relativistic theory works as you approach the speed of light. So it's a fascinating setup. Again, it's out of the purview of the movie to do anything with that specifically. But it looks like a very cool idea, and I may file these serial numbers off and use it someday. Okay, any questions on science before we go to technology?
Now, in that particular situation, how do you deal with the fact, when you say hyperspace, it always says jump to light speed, and as a kid that always, it's like, wait a minute, I thought you couldn't go faster than light speed. And right off the bat, you have something on there where you have to deal with the idea of relativity, that they are effectively moving, they are somehow violating it or going around it. So what clues did we have to actually come up with an idea of how are they not actually breaking it, or are the rules different or something of that from the movie?
The question is the jump to light speed line, what does that mean? Fortunately, you can do your jargon any way you want to when you're writing. I see it as since you can't actually reach light speed because of relativistic effects, as you get closer, time slows down, your mass increases and all of that. I'm seeing that as you get to a certain speed, kick in the hyperdrive, it bounces over that awkward region where you can't really get to light speed, kicks you to probably a little past light speed, and then into hyperspace. make the jump past light speed probably would work better scientifically, or in the theory we're coming up with. But in actual practice, you can make your jargon sound any way you want to. Jump to light speed, jump past light speed. Jump to light speed's a little easier to say. And as long as everybody knows what you're talking about, you know, it doesn't matter. My father used to point out that if you're on a train and someone says, look out, and you physically look out, you're likely to get your head taken off by the train coming next to you. So your jargon, colloquialisms are always a little bit up for grabs. As long as your reader understands what you're talking about, you can fiddle it however you want. Yeah, there are more things you can explore with hyperspace. Let's go on with science and tech for a bit. Okay, one of the my big annoyances with especially Hollywood, which has so much, you know, not figured out how the real world operates, is that first thing you need to know about tech is that it spreads outward. Somebody invents something, it doesn't stay in a box, it doesn't stay in a little, oh, this is a cool little thing. Somebody takes it and runs with it. Bad example of how that's not done right is in early episodes of Star Trek Next Generation. They invented this magic, well, computerized system on the ship whereas find Commander LaForge. Commander LaForge is in 10 forward. Okay, great. It's a good sort of system, easy to do with the badges, the communicators they've got. A logical thing to do. Unfortunately, 3 or 4 episodes into the series, they had a couple of rogue Klingons run them up over the ship, and they couldn't find them. Now, if you're going to build a locator for your crew, somebody's going to say, hey, why don't we put an intruder alert locator system in while we're at it? Easy enough to do. Look for infrared signatures, look for no communicator, you know, mark him. You also should have built some kind of intruder blocking system into, you know, intruder alert, you close a whole bunch of bulkheads so you trap them wherever they are. Apparently that wasn't in there as well. And again, the technology, they're hinting at the technology, but they're not using it the way normal people, universe people would. Yeah.
I think that's mainly because the Federation is so pacifistic.
Yeah.
I think that's mainly because the Federation is so pacifistic that maybe they didn't think to do so.
The Federation is pacifistic. Why do they have weapons? It's been pointed out that Starfleet is the branch of the Federation that is able to enforce treaties, etc., with weapons. It's a military, no matter what Gene Roddenberry wanted to call it. And as to, because they're pacifistic, they don't have these things, I'm reminded of Hagar, the horrible cartoon, where he's talking to his son and saying, Vikings are afraid. And his wife calls, Hagar, get in here. He says, on the other hand, Vikings aren't stupid either. So, yeah, I mean, you can be pacifistic and you can also be stupid. I mean, they're not coincidental, but you know, let's assume that everybody isn't going to greet us with open arms and flowers. And since nobody ever did accept them with open arms and flowers, I think they'd have learned very well. This is getting a little out of the tech range, just slightly. But you have the same problem in whichever Star Trek movie has the Borg attacking the Enterprise, that First Contact. Yes. They had no contingency plan to deal with the Borg attack. Yet they had met them a couple of seasons earlier.
Yeah.
One of the branches of the military is designed to look at potential threats and come up with ways to deal with them. So they should have had a contingency in place. I mean, the clever way to do it, again, if you're writing, that's the easy way out, but it makes people stupid. What you need is to have a contingency in place that should work and then find a reason why it doesn't. Same problem with Jurassic Park. Well, come on. One simple solution to that would have been, okay, we have gas canisters all over the island that have a particular gas that will knock out, and it's coded into the genetics of the dinosaurs, it will knock them out or even kill them if we need to. How do you get around something like that? You have some panicked tech trigger it in the rain.
Jurassic Park had a lysine effect.
They were supposed to be able to reproduce.
Yeah.
So that was.
If they needed to stop them, they just didn't give them the lysine supplement, and they weren't supposed to be able to make it themselves, and they would die.
But they don't die fast enough. You want your long-term solutions, and you want your right now. And you need both. And you as a writer are going to want to have both sides clever. You want the containment for your dinosaurs very clever. It cannot fail. And then as a writer, you have to find a way to make it fail to get the story you want. But it looks much more reasonable when everybody's been thinking and nobody has been, okay, this is good enough, let's break for lunch. The good example of how tech is done, just throw this one out, is the hoverboards from Back to the Future. You start with a flying car. Someone takes this technology, miniaturize it, makes it cheaper, and makes floating skateboards out of it. And again, that's the direction technology goes. Ripples outward, thousands and millions of minds take this thing and start playing with it. A little real-world example, look at your cell phone. Oh, it's a phone. Let's add a camera to it. Let's make it more memory so we can download stuff. Let's make a gazillion apps for it. You watch the progression of all of this and you see how it's done, because not one person is planning it. Thousands or millions are planning it and all adding their little contribution in. And you're not going to be able to think all through your tech because you're only one person, but you should at least be aware this happens and find some directions it would be likely to go. Along the corollary of that is that off-the-shelf technology will not stay proprietary for very long. One of my biggest annoyances with Harry Potter was the time turners. Because if the villain has a time turner, he cannot be defeated. So if he can get even a 10-second leap on defeat, he can go back 6 hours and get away and try again. And when I first saw that in the movie, I said, please, no, don't do time travel. And then she did time travel. And it doesn't help to lock up all the time turners you've got, because knowing they exist means somebody will be able to reproduce it. It's very hard to have a proprietary stuff stay that way for long. Real world example, atomic bomb. Yes, the Soviets sold a lot of our tech, but knowing it existed and knowing the basic theory, they would have had it eventually anyway. Because once you know it can be done, it will be done. Your tech needs to make sense with the real world, okay? One of my phasers, guns are designed this way, the shape they are, because that's how the human hand operates. When I first saw the next generation dustbusters, that are held like this and triggered by your thumb, somebody's not thinking, that's not how you design something like that. Now granted, the original series had the little small phasers, you operated like that, but that was designed to be concealable. You gave trade-offs for concealability or for other factors. But your regular gun is going to be shaped the way your .45 caliber is now, because that's how the human hand is built. Another good example of making sense with the real world, A New Hope. Han and Luke escaping Death Star, they're heading up and down the ladders to the gun base. When they get to the gun base, gravity is shifted 90 degrees. So they're sitting down, gravity's downward. Well, this is how you do something in the real world. You set your gravity plates or whatever how you want them. You want to be able to climb up because you want your gravity to the decks inside, fine. But you don't want to have to be feeling like you're craning your neck while you're shooting, fine. You shift your gravity 90 degrees and you sit down and you're fine. So think about how things will work in the real world. Again, a corollary of what you don't see can't be done. If the capability of something exists, it will be done. Now in the movies, we did not have variable length lightsabers, but later on you adapted those and made, you could have a lightsaber that had 2 or 3 different lengths. Okay, if you could really do, I don't know, I assume that they'll have passed Lucasfilm obviously, but I don't know if George ever saw it. But if you can have lightsabers of variable lengths, flip a switch and it is suddenly twice as long. This is what you do against those, what are they called, electropipes in Revenge of the Sith. Okay, I can't cut through it, fine. I'll extend my length, my reach by a factor of 2. Now let's see who tried to stop me. So again, if the capability exists, you want to think about that as a writer and be able to use it. Internal consistency is always, again, a big thing. Things have to work pretty much the same way all the time, unless there's a good reason why it doesn't work the same. We see Obi-Wan cut off an arm in the cantina. That's how lightsabers work, which is why when Obi-Wan disappears, when Vader hits him, you know something else has happened, because that's not how we've seen lightsabers work. And in fact, that is something different has happened. So you need to keep your tech internally consistent. As a writer, do not give out more information than you have to the reader, because you will invariably mess yourself up someplace along the line if you do. You give them everything they need, but do not give them more than what they need. I quote from Wikipedia, the lightsaber description. The weapon consisted of a blade of pure plasma emitted from the hilt and suspended in the force containment field. The field contained the immense heat of the plasma, protecting the wielder, and allowed the blade to keep its shape. The hilt was almost always self-fabricated by the wielder to match his or her specific needs, etc. Due to the weightlessness, this is the sentence that it got me. Due to the weightlessness of plasma and the strong gyroscopic effect generated by it, lightsabers required a great deal of strength and dexterity to wield, and was extremely difficult and dangerous for the untrained to attempt using. Okay, anybody in physics, remember enough physics to know what gyroscopic effect is?
Something spinning.
Okay, you remember that they always did this in high school physics. They would sit you up in a spinning chair, give you this weighted wheel with two handles, and get it spinning, and you would then turn it around, and by changing the angular momentum direction, your chair and you have to pick up the rest of it, conservation of angular momentum, and you'd start spinning around. And all the kids who've never seen it said, ooh. Okay, that depends on the fact that the wheel has weight. A weightlessness of the plasma will not create a gyroscopic effect. It is physically impossible. They should have quit earlier and just said, there is a gyroscopic effect, and you don't have to explain it. You also have the question why, if you've got a force containing the plasma that'll hold the plasma, why do you need the plasma in the first place? But that's a different story. I'm focusing more on the, don't tell them about how the gyroscopic effect comes in, just do it. Okay, and then finally, question of, you need to consider how your tech, your science also, but especially how your technology is going to affect your culture and your society. And one of the best and simplest rules of thumb or quick ideas on this thing is the acronym PERSIA. Political, economic, religious, social, intellectual, artistic. These are kind of 6 main effects or 6 main characteristics of the society, and you need to think about how your tech will affect that. So let's do a little experiment. Let's go with droids. Okay, political. How do droids affect the politics?
Rights for droids.
Hmm?
Rights for droids.
Rights for droids. Okay.
They improve communication between diplomats.
Say again.
They improve communications between different cultures and diplomats.
They improve, that's a good one, improve the communications between various species because you can program in the translators.
You'll see droids taking over jobs that people will be doing. You'll find more people without jobs because of droids.
Okay, well, getting droids taking over jobs will come at the economic, but economics always have a political aspect to it. I get
You got it. I got me excited.
a shout out for economics.
Yay!
Yay! Yay, economics. Okay, well, we're getting a little close. I'm just going to read these out, and I can't hear you guys in the back anyway. So, okay, other political things that occurred to me were you can build battle droids. You don't have to recruit an army, pay them, etc. You can make your own machines go to war for you. Huge political thing, as was shown in a couple of movies you may have seen. Economic, obviously they take jobs the way other people might have done. This is going to put people out of work. Are they going to find other jobs? That's not really addressed much in Star Wars, but you need to think about it in your own book. Because, of course, if you throw a lot of people out of jobs, we get back into political, hey, I want my job back. Religious. Rights for droids. Do droids have souls? We touched on that just a little bit. How many droids are going to impersonate deities? Programs to impersonate a deity. You can get all sorts of other complications going. Again, the movies didn't really deal with this all that much, but the hint is there enough to recognize George and recognize that this is going to be something out of the purview of the movies, but it's going to be there. Intellectual, new ideas, new definitions of what it is to be a person. We've already talked about communication. Any other thoughts?
Artificial intelligence.
Sorry?
Artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence, problem solving for that. And you're going to be you can be putting mathematicians out of work as well as the day laborers, which isn't going to sit well with them. Fortunately, they're not usually well organized. One more.
Advances in prosthetics.
Oh, advanced prosthetics. And very likely following on from the droid thing. Yes, okay, the prosthetics and the droids are going to be working hand in hand, so to speak. Unintentional, but appreciate it. You're going to have advances of one will spur advances in the other, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, again, your technology is going to go from one area to another. And artistic, well, I could point out how many books have been written about these things, so I guess that qualifies as artistic. But yeah, how are droids, how are artificial intelligence is going to come in. You have, going into the prosthetics, Stephen Hawking with a new body. How would that be? Or whoever the artist with my left foot, was it? Who could only control, 1 foot.
Richard Nixon in
If you could
Futurama.
create
Richard Nixon in Futurama.
Richard Nixon, Futurama. Okay. Now we're getting into dystopias. That's not the idea here.
If you're going artistic, like the difference between the design, like the idea that C-3PO is designed to look like human and R2-D2 looks like a trash can.
That's a subtle aspect of artistic. What do you want your droid to look like? Is form going to follow function? You could have an R2-shaped droid being a translator, but more species will react better to a biped, humanoid type of droid. So yeah, you've got all that kind of things coming into your artistic level as well. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll go ahead and do the what's wrong with the scenario now, and then if we've got time, we'll open up for more questions. Okay, I promised you lame but unique. Here they are. As mentioned earlier, the original title of Scoundrels was Solo's 11. I have 11 solo cups. Each one has a name of one of the 11, and it's signed. By me, not that one. Sometimes I need to clarify. We'll go through the list. They've been put in random order by a die, die roll. When you win one of them, you will come and take the first one. You don't get to pick and choose. You'll take whatever the next one is in the path. And I've got a 12th one here just so you can't see anything going on. Okay, so we're going to do the what's wrong with the scenario. I'm just going to try to see who we'll do hand raising, see who raises first. Corbin will help from the back. I'm going to try to, I've got certain answers in mind. If you get close enough or variant or something, we'll go ahead with it. If you're off from what I'm looking for, we'll try again. Okay? I know that's clumsy and random, but I'm not a lightsaber. and to just to make it clear, I will not sign any more solo cup, so these will be unique, but definitely land. Okay, first scenario. Everyone spends all their time jacked into the computers, living out their lives in cyberspace. Warren?
Wait
a minute.
Oh, when do they eat and drink?
Say again?
When do they eat and drink?
When do they eat and drink? And even more importantly,
Go to
who
the
keeps the
bathroom.
food going, who keeps growing it, who keeps fixing the machines? Come and get a cup. Okay, second scenario. Sword versus gun. Or what's wrong and how do you fix it on this one? Did you get a... Okay,
Right here in the black.
right here? Okay, Coronel, tag.
Right here. Yes, you.
Right here.
Gun speed source on every level. Bullets travel faster, have longer reach.
Right, basically your question of, going to be part two, how do you fix this? Or what scenario can you come up with where it works? Yeah, a ranged weapon against a close-in weapon is normally going to get you slaughtered. So, give me a scenario that fixes that.
Throwing knives versus gun?
Force.
Right.
Fast enough to reach.
Say again?
Something you can repel fast enough to reach the same range of the...
Then it wouldn't really be a sword anymore.
Armor. Personal shields.
Well, you got the answer, so I guess but who else has another scenario? Yeah.
What you could do to fix it would be
Come on down.
by having the sword reflect whatever the projectile was.
You do what George did. You have the force enabling you to block the ranged weapon. The other situation where it works is if you're in very close quarters and you've got a short sword. Sometimes in that case, especially if the enemy is using rifles, you can sometimes get in there and... Did the first guy get these?
Yes.
Okay. I'm missing something. In close quarters, in a hallway or something, often a short sword will be better than a rifle simply because you can get in where they can't maneuver around. Okay, third one. Lieutenant Commander data created by Dr. Soong is unique among Starfleet officers.
A lot of the
Wait,
officers.
Is he the right one?
Over there in the blue.
Oh, my lightsaber?
Yes.
The Starfleet is made out of entirely different species. I mean, it stands very unlikely that advanced species would be able to come up with their own android or robot. Data seems to be the only one, unless you figure out that soon and make others, which we'll figure out later in the series. So
Okay.
that's the only android.
Basically, that's correct. It's even worse. He's created by human from off-the-shelf technology. Remember what I said about, unique things don't stay unique for long? It's even worse when you are creating it with stuff everybody else has. No, that's wrong. You can generally back engineer, reverse engineer. You can generally reverse engineer most things, but especially something whose components you understand. Now, bear in mind, interestingly enough, in the original Next Generation Bible, which I got from a friend, data had been created by an alien race. They'd been passing a dying human colony, were unable to save the people, so they took their memories and downloaded them into an android they left behind. Now it works, because now we're talking entirely alien technology. There's every chance we cannot reverse engineer this. But once he's invented by human, I cringed at that. He's too useful not to have one per starship, at least. And throwing a cat, it's well worth it. Okay, this is a tech one. With the fate of Earth in the balance, Scotty uses his newly created transporter to beam Kirk to the departing Enterprise.
Right up in the front there.
Yeah. In front? Okay.
Why wouldn't you beam everyone else to safety?
Not what I'm looking for. It's a tech question. Who's next?
Right next.
Next week? Okay.
If it's newly created, he's never tested it before. How does he know it's going to work?
Okay, that's a good one. It's not exactly. This is go just for the tech aspect. Who is it? what you know about Star Trek and transporters and all that. We get it? By the way, one per customer. If you want one, keep your hand up. Did you get it? Okay.
The ship was in motion. Couldn't transport their motion.
Amplify. Forward the answer, as they say in. What kind of motion is it in? It said in the movie. Okay, we'll try one more. One more try.
I was going to say that if it's a newly created technology, the transporters work with if there's something that receives it. If it's newly created, they might not have the technology to be able to receive from that kind of new transport.
Actually, it's not necessary in Star Trek. You beam in and out. Okay, we'll try one more. I think I heard it correct. What was that? The Enterprise is in hyperspace. The transporter is a light speed thing. You can't possibly reach it. You can't possibly hit it. It's like shooting at a supersonic fighter with a BB gun. It simply doesn't matter. It's in motion, but especially it's in motion in hyperspace. There are a lot of other problems with that transporter, but we're going to focus on that one. Okay. You got a minion? Oh, minions are always good to have. Picture? Pause for a picture. Oh, you got it? Okay. This one should hopefully be a little bit simpler. Having destroyed 95% of humanity, Skynet sends its Terminators to destroy the scattered and fugitive survivors.
If you destroy 95% of humanity, I mean, what's the point of them?
I can't hear you.
If you destroy 95% of humanity, what's the remaining 5% going to matter?
What are they going to?
What are they going to matter if you destroy the 95%?
What do they matter? Okay, not what I'm looking for.
Down front.
Down front, yeah.
Okay, if you've just destroyed 95% of humanity, what makes you think that the 5% left would be able to create something like that?
You try a different version of that answer.
Okay.
I think you may have it, I'm not sure.
If 95% of humanity has been destroyed, why would the 5% left, how would they, you're assuming that they would be able to build something like this all on their own, 5%, but would they be able to?
Let's try to get a little bit closer. Okay.
If I'm understanding your point, why get the remaining 5%? Either you want the remaining 5% because you're afraid they'll go back in time, or B, you want the remaining 5% so you can use their skin to harvest skin on the Terminators.
Okay, this again is a tech question. Right? Didn't make that clear. Or let's just, having destroyed most of humanity, Skynet sends its Terminators to destroy the scattered and fugitive survivors. Okay.
Even when they have 5%, they're not going to overturn you because it's only 5%.
Okay. No, it's tech question. Tech question.
If you've already destroyed most of humanity and the planet, why can't you just wait a few decades for the rest to just die out instead of spending the resources?
No, that's not where we're going. There's that's where everybody else is going. Think technology. Think technology. Okay. Yeah.
If Skynet and the Terminators are so efficient, why did they leave the 5% in the first place?
Well, because the first attack was nuclear. Well, the first attack was the nuclear war, and you're going to have some survivors out of that one. No, think tech, think technology. Okay. Okay.
The Terminators are infiltrators. They're going to have a much harder time killing the remaining 5% because they're scattered and in different places than a concise military strike would have.
We're not getting in the right direction. I don't have one to add in though. Make up something. We'll try two more. Yeah, waving. Yeah, you.
If there's only 5% of humanity left, what made the Terminators?
Say again.
If there's only 5% of humanity left, what made the Terminators?
Bingo. Create factories, create Terminators. You need the you either need human slaves of some sort, but either way you can't have them all scattered and fugitive. You need something to make the machines to make the Terminators. So you can't, Skynet can't do it all by itself. Okay. Okay, let's get back to one we talked about before. So close, but yeah, I should have given 95%. People focus on the number. There is a major problem with a Star Trek type transporter in a stable society. How does it destabilize the society? Remember how Star Trek works? You beam things down, you beam things back. Why does this destabilize your society? Okay, Corbin's got it. Look at Corbin, find out where he's coming.
Economically, like trafficking of arms and economics. Yeah, I can go to France for lunch. Arms and borders control becomes possible.
You can't control your border.
And weapons and trafficking and stuff like that.
Okay, close enough. The point is, you can take anything, and you can put anything. You can put bombs in the White House. You can transport your illegals. You can snatch millionaires or gold balls. What you will wind up with is a vast war, because somebody's going to use this to make war on somebody else. So yeah, it's an unstable society. Yet another thing Roddenberry didn't get right. By the way, if you think I'm picking on Star Trek too much, especially the last movie, you haven't seen anything. Buy me a drink and budget an hour, and I'll tell you all about what was wrong with that movie. Okay, this one will be easier. This is not so much a tech one as listen to all the words in this and tell me why it is a wrong statement. With the invention of the flying car, the modern computer can soar to work over the city with casual freedom.
Why does the computer need a car to go to work?
Oh, commuter, sorry. I'll enunciate that one more time. Hands down. With the invention of the flying car, the modern commuter can soar to work over the city in casual freedom. Okay, look at Corwin, find us. Who is it?
Yeah, it wouldn't be casual because everybody would have a flying car and it would still just be congested mayhem in the air.
Absolutely not going to be casual, absolutely not going to be freedom. You're going to be safe on the ground, in the air. Yeah, come on. Yeah, so okay, an alien warship is defeated by uploading a virus into its computer.
Why would a programmer on Earth or computer scientist have any idea of the language of the alien computers?
There's no possible way on Earth to write a virus for unknown computers. Okay, now I'm going to give you a sentence, and there are two there are three meanings I can think of as to what this sentence means or implies, and finding one of them, we'll go with that way. The advent of successful, oops, I left out a word. The advent of successful fusion ushers in a new age for humanity. Right in front, yeah.
It doesn't say what the age could be. It could be an age either of prosperity or destruction. It's ambiguous.
Okay, pick one that would lead to one of those two.
It could usher in a new class of weapons more terrible than anything ever seen before. We're all assuming that fusion is some kind of savior. It could be our destroyer.
Which is basically the one we're in right now, fusion power being the hydrogen bomb. The other two scenarios, yeah, come on up. The other two scenarios I came up with, and we would have made you go more of these if we had more time, would have been, you can have, depending on the economics, if the fusion power is easy and cheap, you have cheap energy which leads to our golden age. If you have it very expensive, very hard to do, you're going to have it in the hands of conglomerates, and you're basically in the same position we're in right now. Or the third is, I'm talking about the H-bomb, and we're already there. I didn't say it was a good new age. 2 minutes. Okay, 2 more to go. An asteroid mining ship is thrown 120 years into the past, where it engages a starship in combat and then shuffles around for 20 years waiting for James Kirk to grow up. Okay, we want a tech solution. Okay.
There is no way that they're just hanging around doing nothing. They're constantly looking around what's going on, how they're fixing themselves up so they can advance and probably take over the world that they're in right now.
Yeah, the main point tech-wise of this thing is, yeah, come on up, is resupply. How do you resupply for that time? Where do you get food? Where, I mean, Romulans, you're going to be stopping off places. How are you going to buy the food? Where are you going to, how are you going to avoid the people who will call up the Romulan Empire and say, some weird Romulans are right here, you might want to investigate.
You're in a Klingon prison.
Okay, I've heard that was an uncut scene, that they were in a Klingon prison. The problem with that scenario is, after the first month, that ship is no longer there. That ship has been taken apart and sent to different parts of the Klingon Empire to study for reverse engineering.
They have replicators.
They had what?
Replicators. They're a mining ship. They can get fuel for their power supply, and they have replicators.
Okay, in that case, how are we resupplying their weapons? How many mining crews do you know who have lots of weapons that can take out starships?
I'm not
The
saying
thing
it's
is, doesn't work.
Ruby. I'm saying they can resupply.
More technology.
You have to hand wave awfully hard to get there. And finally, the last one. This is a scientific type question, so it'll help the scientists in for the scientists in the audience. However, if you pay close attention to the 3 classic Star Wars movies, the hint or the answer is in there. So, final question. What is the problem with Alderaan's destruction as seen in A New Hope? Wait,
Her name.
Yes.
The problem with the destruction is when you see the flash, it flashes out like it's coming from the core, when actually it's destroyed straight through by the beam. It should be broken.
Let's go, we'll try one more. It's not quite the problem. Remember, as seen in A New Hope.
Is it because it should burn up the planet? It shouldn't make it explode. There's nothing that should make it explode. Since laser is light and heat, it burns up the planet and doesn't. There's nothing for an explosion. It may crumble, but in A New Hope, it literally explodes into shards and pieces. There should.
Well, if you pump enough energy into something, you can make it explode. What's the problem with the explosion as it is seen?
That you can hear.
Oh. I'm talking about, as opposed to the Death Star explosion. Let's think about it that way.
So the direction of the debris should be going backwards as the force of the laser should be pushing it out
Well,
backwards.
it depends on how fast the laser punches through, how that's going to work. There's a more fundamental one I'm looking at.
Glasses here.
There's sparks?
No.
There was way too much, there wasn't enough matter flying out of the planet. Like, it was a whole planet, there was only a few asteroids that came out of it.
Well, only a few of the Han flew through, but it's spreading out. We're not quite getting there. It's something more fundamental. Think back to the Death Star explosions you saw. That'll give you the hint.
When it blew up, wouldn't it take it out part of the Death Star because the proximity? You explosion that large.
Alderaan, you're talking Alderaan. Death Star is nowhere. Oh.
It wouldn't. The explosion itself would take it out.
Well, we expect them to have really good shields. You know, the explosions per se, I'm looking at. No idea. Who is not trying? Lauren, go ahead.
Okay. If it's a laser, shouldn't it just poke a hole through the center?
Well, we'll assume that it's got enough energy transfer conduction to do that. Okay, one.
Because if Alderaan exploded in the shards, the laser would have to go into the core of the planet and then explode inside the middle, inside the core, because it just exploded on the surface of the planet, so it would only take out like part of the planet. So.
Well, we can conceive of a laser that will punch all the way through and will. Okay, the explosion. I don't mind Alderaan exploding. I just need to know what's wrong with how you saw it happen. Let's go back there. Yeah.
The explosion was too uniform?
You have to speak loud.
The explosion was too uniform?
Once more.
The explosion was too uniform?
Too uniform. You're on the right track, but not quite there. Go ahead. Yeah.
The explosion should have been outward from the path of the laser.
Explosion outward or over, so close. Not quite though. Yeah.
When the planet exploded, gravity would pull all the chunks back towards the center.
Not really. Probably again a force enough explosion back.
This explosion, there's a ring that goes out around the explosion, is that it?
Well, we'll try to ignore the ring because that makes no sense. Something's fundamentally wrong. Think about Alderaan. Think about the Death Stars. Think about the difference between them. Yeah.
Is the laser coming from a distance away? I mean, the Death Star 2 are destroyed, but the fighters coming into the Death Star, the Death Star has to shoot this laser from however it gets to Alderaan. And how do they direct that laser without hitting anything else or anything else getting in the way?
No, we're not getting anywhere near right track. I'm just over there. Yeah, lady.
The explosion is a flat plane. It doesn't go out.
No. Who hasn't answered this one?
Didn't the Death Star blow immediately and Alderaan, like, not immediately, but the second afterwards it blew up?
Oh, we're getting so close. Yeah, the mass back there.
Both the Death Stars, when they blew up, the ships had time to get away, but with Alderaan it was a lot quicker.
Alderaan was still. Say again.
With the Death Stars, it took a second because the ships had time to get away, but with Alderaan, when the laser hit it, it blew up, like right then.
I think we'll call that. They'll call it. It's too fast.
Yeah.
Remember Remember in the third movie, you can see the explosion rippling outward. Explosions travel at 3 to 10 kilometers a second. Yeah, come on down. 3 to 10 kilometers per second. For a Death Star, especially an explosion starting in the middle, you can see the outer surface blow up together. And again, you see that explosion rippling outward with the second Death Star. Alderaan is a planet. It's 8,000 miles thick. It will take 6 or 7 minutes, even if you start exploding it, to get that explosion all the way out to the surface.